Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Monday, August 10th, 2020. And here are today's top stories. Mortgage rates continue to fall, what you need to know, and theme parks and travel destinations begin to reopen. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Jacob Passy of MarketWatch. Jacob, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's always great talking with you. I always enjoy the conversations we have on the podcast. I'm glad you can make your seasonal debut on the network. Let's jump right in though, because as we've talked about on the network, on the podcast, interest rates continue to, I think, fall. And it's been a very interesting personal residential real estate market. Why don't you take us through? What are some of your thoughts as you're covering this on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, I think the big question is how low will they go? At the start of the pandemic, I did an interview with the CEO of Quicken Loans in which he said that he did not expect rates to drop below 3% anytime soon. Sure enough, a few months later, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. If you look at the long history of mortgage rates, who would have thought we would have gotten to this point? We didn't get this low even during the 2008 financial crisis. This is an all-time low, and there's room to go lower. So as you and I discuss a lot on the podcast, mortgage rates are short-term rates. So they follow the direction, or are not short-term rates, they're long-term rates. So they follow the direction of long-term bond yields. So movements in the Federal Reserve, things like that, those don't directly affect mortgage rates. What really will move the needle with them is the movement in the 10-year Treasury note, for instance, the yield on that. So that has dropped to an all-time low because of the pandemic. And there's the gap between the 10-year Treasury yield and the 30-year mortgage rate has widened throughout the pandemic. So that suggests there's room for rates to go even lower on mortgages. I think if you're someone who's looking to buy a home, or if you're already a homeowner and you haven't refinanced, this year or in recent years, it's certainly something to be looking at.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. I mean, should people be out there thinking about the refi, knowing that it's like timing the market? You can never time the market. Just want to reiterate that, but people should be aware by watching the show that I believe that you can never time the market. But in terms of timing rates going low and assuming the rates are going to low, you can really never time that. Are you expecting, and the people that you talk to, you're expecting to see a lot more refis? Because if I recall correctly, we saw refis before the pandemic really, really pick up. We saw restaffing and things like that. Would you expect that to continue even though we're still in the midst of this pandemic?
The refi volume is definitely elevated. Like you just said, in March, we saw a massive wave of refinances when rates were really starting to drop.
Yeah.
They've obviously dropped even lower since then. Anecdotally, I've spoken with homeowners who, because of that massive wave back in March, it took so long for a lot of lenders to work through the pipeline. So, a friend of mine who was looking to refinance her home, she actually just a couple weeks ago switched the lender she was going to use because she had not yet closed with the original lender she was dealing with, and then another one came along. She was working with a mortgage broker who can compare different rates, and her broker came back with an even lower rate than she got back in March, so she snagged it and is hoping to close pretty soon with them. Like you said, though, don't try to time the market. I mean, these are rock bottom rates, and the chances of rates dropping significantly enough from here such that it would make sense to wait are not guaranteed. There's no guarantee that rates will drop to 2% or something crazy like that. And to be sure, if you've already refinanced in March, you shouldn't necessarily refinance now. If there are costs involved, closing costs, things like that. And, you want to make sure that you're getting into a loan where you'll break even such that, if you're planning to move in a few years, it may not make sense to refinance because the closing costs that you pay to refinance might be, more expensive than what you end up saving through the lower interest rate. So lots to take into account. I think, if you're looking in the market right now, some things to keep in mind if you're thinking about refinancing. First off is the term. If you're in a 30-year mortgage right now, rates have dropped so much in recent weeks that, it might make sense to get a 15-year mortgage. You may not end up paying less each month. You might have the same monthly payment, but you'll pay off the loan so much quicker, so you'll save so much more in interest in the long run. Other things to consider are, talking to your current, mortgage servicer or lender to see if they have any options available to you for refinancing. They don't want to lose your business, so they may be able to cut deals in terms of closing costs and things like that. So those are some things to, keep in mind if you're pursuing a refinance.
Absolutely. And what about the buying of homes? We had talked about there not being any slack, no real inventory going into COVID and the pandemic. I would imagine that things pretty much shuttered at the height of the pandemic, where people were not buying or selling, or at least they were not visiting homes, Jacob, in order to buy and sell. What about picking up around the country in places like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, some of the bigger hubs?
So the real estate market is definitely hot right now, which is very surprising, like for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Home buyers, there's tons of pent up demand. Folks, especially millennials, really want to become homeowners. They're looking at these rock bottom mortgage rates right now and are like, hey, this is the best time to lock that in. Yeah. So that is driving a ton of demand at the same time when supply is still very much constrained. Even before the pandemic, at the start of this year, real estate economists were saying that, the home sales activity that would occur this year would be constrained because there just weren't enough homes available for sale for there to be a huge growth in home sales. And that's still the case. And it's even more the case because the pandemic scared some sellers from putting their homes on the market. They were looking at this tumultuous economy with record unemployment, and we're thinking this is not the time for me to put my home up for sale. And so a lot of those folks haven't come back into the market. And so buyers who are looking to buy right now are facing even they would for a very small number of homes. Right. That being said, there are some interesting trends that are occurring across the country. And so depending on where you live, you might have an easier time. So one big trend that lots of folks are talking about right now is the flight to the suburbs. Folks living in densely populated major cities who are looking at, many, many more months of working remotely from their cramped apartment with no backyard are suddenly taking a liking to the suburbs. And even before this pandemic, in cities like San Francisco, we were already seeing folks moving out because of the record high home prices in those areas, and rental prices too. This isn't just home buyers, it's also renters looking to move. So there's suburbs happening and it's picking up steam. What that means in the long run, interestingly, is in major cities like New York, you might end up finding deals. And some real estate economists actually believe that home prices in urban parts of the country, the downtown areas of major cities, so in Manhattan, in San Jose, San Francisco, you might see home prices actually come down because people are looking to more affordable areas and areas where they can get more space.
Yeah, well, this is certainly changing day to day, minute to minute. And I think a lot of it's dependent on what's happening with the virus, depending on by state, by region, by local area. Jacob, I want to hold you over. When we come back, though, we're going to talk to Jacob about travel. Are amusement parks opening up? Are people hitting the road? What are they doing? We're going to check in with Jacob, so stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
If you are like 58% of Americans, you didn't go to college. Or you did, but never finished. Maybe it's the thought of a big, intimidating campus. At Independence University, all classes are held online. Maybe it's the thought of being alone in a sea of students. At Independence U, you'll get a personal support team to help you every step of the way. Maybe it's the cost of all those books and supplies. Online means no books to buy. We even give you a new laptop and tablet to keep when you graduate. Maybe your life doesn't fit typical college classes. At Independence U, our online college fits your schedule. Let's meet a few students.
Independence University held my hand through the process.
Don't be afraid to take the leap because it has changed my life drastically.
Just take the first step and you can do it. If I did it, you can do it too.
At IU, there's no barriers to your degree.
800-535-9916.
Welcome back. We're talking to Jacob Passy of MarketWatch. Jacob, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Glad to be here and glad to talk travel.
Yeah, we're going to shift gears now. So we did a deep dive on real estate, and again, a lot changing there. Let's talk travel. Last week we had AAA's Jeanette Castellano on talking about how Americans were hitting the road, and it seems like more Americans are doing things regionally and doing things outdoors. I know on the podcast we talked about Disney, we talked about theme parks. What can you tell us about the reopening and what that means for some of these not hotspots in terms of coronavirus, but hotspots in terms of places where kids and families like to go?
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that because the theme park capital of the world, Orlando, all of their parks have reopened, albeit with, major changes to how the parks operate and changes that are occurring on an ongoing basis. So, Disney World, for instance, you're required to wear face masks when you go to the theme parks now. And that's the rule since they reopened, back in mid-July. Mm-hmm. But since they reopened, they've actually changed the rules a bit. So, you have to wear face masks, but they've specified that certain types of masks aren't allowed. Neck gaiters, which are popular with runners, and then those face masks where there's the vent that, helps it make it a little easier to breathe, makes it a little less stuffy in the mask. Those are not allowed because they don't give as much protection against coronavirus as other types of face masks do. So these changes are occurring on an ongoing basis. But Disney released, we're talking on Wednesday, Disney on Tuesday of this week released their most recent earnings and kind of gave us a little peek into what's going on in the theme parks. So, the theme park segment of Disney has really suffered because of the pandemic. Yeah. But one interesting factoid from their presentation was that still, even during the pandemic, 50% of the visitors coming to Disney World in Orlando are from out of state. So that just shows you, that these theme parks are a major draw. I think there's still an open question as to whether this is safe. And there's lots of debate in the, Disney fan community about whether you should be going to a theme park right now. Also, folks who are fans of Universal Studios, of SeaWorld, of Busch Gardens, all of the major theme parks in Florida have reopened, are seeing visitors come in, obviously not at the levels pre-pandemic. They're not even allowed to have that, number of people in the parks. And for folks who go to the parks, they talk about it being, a pretty pleasant experience, all things considered, because ride times are low, crowds are low. Certainly there's lots of things you can't do. There's no normal parades, no meet and greets with princesses and Mickey Mouse. But it is still, a fun experience for a lot of folks. But I think safety is something that everyone needs to keep in mind and needs to make, their personal decisions with that in account.
Jacob, you talk about balancing the safety and health with going to the theme park. And I can certainly understand the argument of, hey, you shouldn't be going out. I think that if people are practicing the proper safety protocols, wearing the mask, socially distancing, following the rules that I would think at these theme parks, not just Disney, Universal Studios, but also Six Flags and other places where they have met with local health officials and said, you need to do these things, I would assume that would be good to abate and not pass on the coronavirus.
Yeah, the theme parks have been open for, Universal Studios and SeaWorld have been open since June. Disney World's been open since mid-July. We haven't seen any reports of there being folks, contracting the virus from visits, or employees of the parks, seeing cases counts rise amongst them. So it is definitely, it's not clear whether it's that risky or not. A lot of folks who go to the parks, if you look on social media, other theme park reporters, they say that they feel safer at somewhere like Disney or Universal than they do, at their local grocery store, because the employees there are really rigorously regimenting the compliance with the face mask requirements, with social distancing. There's fewer touch points with folks, when you're going to check out at a gift shop or at a restaurant, you're not really interacting in the same way. There's less at the gift shops. I believe they don't even have you hand over the item you're looking to buy. They have you hold up the tag and they scan it and you swipe, and there's little interaction, much less interaction than there normally would be. And then you would see, at a supermarket, for instance. So I think there definitely is an extent to which this is a very, very safe experience. But, that being said, I've seen reports that, at the end of the day in the parks, you might see people starting to take off their masks, because it is Florida. It's really hot.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily comfortable. And so you might, and I think it's, all it takes is that one instance where, you happen to be next to someone who has it, and here it doesn't just spread through coughing, it spreads through, aerosols, through speaking. Even though the parks are, doing temperature screenings, there's still the element of, cases where people are asymptomatic but still spread it. So this is all things that you need to take in mind. And like Jeanette from AAA talked about, lots of folks might be better off, taking a road trip and visiting places closer to home, or going in an RV on a vacation where they can, really make sure that they are in that bubble just amongst themselves and not interacting with too many other people.
Yeah, and I got to think this is really harming the hotel industry, the service industry in particular, as well as we know airlines severely impacted because people are not really getting on planes, they're not conducting business, they're not going on vacation. Is that your sense from talking to people in and around the, and also cruise lines? I forgot to mention cruise lines, right? I mean, that's a big, that's a huge business right now that has been significantly impacted.
Yeah, I mean, the cruise industry, just this past week, there's been attempts in the past few weeks to resume sailing, but there have been 3 ships now that had resumed sailing that have had outbreaks. I think they are all in Europe. I can't recall exactly, but the Cruise Line Industry Association just announced today, this is again Wednesday, that they will be extending the no sail order for their members through the end of October. So that's a month past where the CDC has currently set their no sail order. So, and at the beginning of the pandemic, there was so many cases, there were so many cases on cruise ships that for a while, the World Health Organization actually had specific line items on their case counts that were for specific outbreaks tied to cruise ships. So, and that makes sense when you think about how this virus spreads and how you're in close quarters a lot of the time. It's hard to, isolate, people on the ship. A lot of the eateries are buffets. There's, just lots of communal spaces on the ship. And it's hard to, effectively social distance when you're in space for that long. On the airline industry side of things, they've seen some pickup as travel has resumed, although there's certainly still major issues for that industry. We just saw Virgin Atlantic declare bankruptcy. There might be more bankruptcies to come among airlines because they're really struggling, especially airlines that specialize with transatlantic flights or international flights. A lot of those just aren't happening right now because of travel restrictions and folks' fear of traveling. Experts have talked about how airlines are doing a lot, but you can't socially distance on a plane. It's not economically feasible, and there just isn't the space to do that. And while we know that masks protect you, if you're sitting in a confined space next to two other people on your sides and people in front, the mask might not provide enough protection for you to avoid getting sick. And that's just not to say nothing of the fact that you could get the virus, in the airport and in other aspects of the travel process. So, airlines and airports are doing a lot to protect their passengers and crew. And there probably is more they could be doing, but it is still a huge question mark right now whether it's safe to take a flight.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is, as we always talk about, changing day to day and minute to minute, depending on what the news is. Hopefully, we desperately need a vaccine that's going to absolutely, kind of put a lot of people at ease and probably allow us to get back to some level of normalcy. When that comes, we don't know. Jacob, always a pleasure chatting with you. I love the conversation. Thanks so much. Look forward to having you back on the program again very soon. And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest or someone you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, and more, check out our newsletter, The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.